What is up on a Thursday night? Welcome into my own little bar, as we always do, right before Thursday Night Football, Week 10. Week 10 tonight, Cincinnati Bengals versus the Baltimore Ravens. Should be a good football game. We have 5 of the biggest NFL storylines that we have to hit, and it was a busy week with the trade deadline happening on Tuesday. But before we get to that, as I always ask you on Thursday, the first question: what are you drinking? Send a comment. Let me know what you're drinking tonight. My drink of choice is another Oktoberfest. I'm going back-to-back, belly-to-belly with Oktoberfests. And this week's Oktoberfest is from Zero Gravity, which is a brewery and a brewer in Vermont. And this is your Oktoberfest Marzen Lager. 5.4 is the ABV. So 5.4 ABV. Trying to get it out of the light. There we go. And this is the Zero Gravity Oktoberfest. I suggest you check it out. It's a very, very good beer. After the huddle, came down with COVID and the flu. Ugh. So water and Gatorade. Well, hopefully you get through that quickly. ATH, appreciate you as always, swinging by. Friend Amy, one of my best friends, says it's close enough. It's a Friday. It's a F it all Friday, so I'm cleaning up some leftovers from the Pats game, sipping a Shipyard Pumpkin. Oh, that's right out of my wife, Kelly, right out of her favorite picks. No whipped cream vodka, though. Well, that's unfortunate. Kelly had that last Friday. A little bit of pumpkin beer with the I think she went with just the vanilla vodka or whatever, but big fan of it. Ryan Lee jumps in, drinking my usual Alaskan cider today. I hear you, my man. Appreciate you. Marilyn, no beer for me tonight. She had a tooth pulled. So we got somebody with COVID and the flu, and then Marilyn comes in with a pulled tooth. So it's been a rough Thursday for some of you. I went to the dentist today, and see, a little bit brighter of a smile, and got to get a filling replaced. But other than that, I got the okay, got the thumbs up. So I'm back like next week to get that filling replaced. But I appreciate you, Marilyn. Thank you. Everybody, again, welcome in. Hopefully you have some fun tonight as we talk about this show. I'll have my first sip of that Zero Gravity before we kick this off. And there it is. Fantastic beer. Let's start with story number 5. Because if you think you've had a tough week, well, Dennis Allen had a very tough week. New Orleans Saints fired their head coach after 7 straight losses from the Saints. And remember, they started the season 2-0, and their offense was lighting it up. Then they lose 7 in a row. They can't figure themselves out. They're 2-7. Of course, you look back now at those first 2 wins of the season. Carolina, we all knew that Carolina was going to be bad. So they beat Carolina in week 1, but then they trounced Dallas week 2. And at the time, we thought Dallas was going to win 10, 11, maybe even 12 games, and that Dallas was a surefire playoff team. We'll get to them a little bit later with the Dak Prescott news. But now you look back, you say, oh yeah, their 2 wins were against Carolina and Dallas, 2 teams that aren't very good at football so far. But it's been a tough schedule. I will say that if I'm Dennis Allen and I look at my schedule through the first, 9 weeks, after those first 2 weeks against Carolina and Dallas, 6 of their 7 losses came against these 6 teams. Against the Eagles. Right now, you'd say the Eagles are a playoff team. At Atlanta is leading the NFC South. At Kansas City, arguably the best team in football. Then they lost to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's been pretty good this year. Shoot, they had a good game earlier this week, even without Mike Evans and without Chris Godwin, right? And then you look at Denver. Denver's defense has been pretty good this year, and then they lost at the Chargers. So it's not like they lost to a bunch of bad teams or mediocre teams. They lost to a bunch of playoff teams and lost to some of the best teams in football. But still, 7 straight losses. You got to do something if you're the Saints. Dennis Allen has not been a very good head coach, and, last week's loss was just brutal. Bill Barnwell from ESPN tweeted that the Saints outgained the Panthers by 150-plus yards, ran for 150-plus yards. They also won the turnover battle. When you look at the last 2 decades, teams had gone 275-0 with that formula. Not the Saints. Saints lost. Now the record is 275-1. They are literally the only team in the last 20 years that outgained their opposition by more than 150 yards, ran for more than 150 yards, won the turnover battle, but yet lost the game. That's historical stuff when we look at the last couple of decades. That's crazy. And that's the kind of loss that gets you fired, especially against that Panthers team. I'm fine with the firing. The team's going nowhere. I don't think Dennis Allen was going to survive 2024 for the most part. And they've got some big future problems for the Saints. I'm sorry, Saints fans, but your team's kind of up a creek without a paddle because of the cap. Again, Bill Barnwell, ESPN, wrote this about the Saints. The Saints are $81 million over next year's cap, and they can't just tear it down and start over because they've restructured $1 billion contracts. Going to need multiple years. So if you're buying stock of NFL teams, do not put any money whatsoever on the Saints because they're in trouble. There is an out in Derek Carr's contract, but if they decide to release Derek Carr, if they decide to take advantage of that contract out, they'll be stuck with $60 million in dead cap money. So it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. All right, before we get to story number 4, Nick Patterson jumps in. Good evening, morning, Friday morning for me here in Asia, drinking coffee. How about Nick joining us from Asia? I love that. I love when people join us from all over the country, all over the world. Nick, I appreciate you. And hopefully you're enjoying your coffee on this Friday morning now. So happy Friday to you, sir. All right, let's get to story number 4. Cincinnati Bengals. Can the Cincinnati Bengals make a run? They play the Ravens tonight. This game is in Baltimore. Cincinnati beat the Raiders, if you look at it in week 9, 41-24. So you get the Ravens tonight in Baltimore after beating the Raiders last week, 41-24. In that game, Joe Burrow threw for not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 freaking touchdowns. Joe Burrow threw 5 touchdowns. Cincy's record now is 4-5. And the question is, can the Bengals make a run to the playoffs? Absolutely. They absolutely can make a run to the playoffs. If you look at the playoff brackets right now, Cincinnati would be 8th/9th in the AFC. So they're right outside the playoffs looking in. They're right on the edge looking at the wild card. And if you look at how the Bengals have performed the last couple of years under Zach Taylor, you know, they finished last season 8-5 in their last 13 games after a slow start. And they not only went 8-5, they played a lot of those games without Joe Burrow, who was hurt, as we know. So they finished the year last season at 8-5. You go back to 2022. The Bengals started that season 0-2. They finished 12-4. I'm not a mathematician, but that tells me that Cincy, they actually won 12 of their last 14 games in 2022. So this is a football team who's been known to go on some runs in the second half of the year. And they have talent. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson. And obviously, ownership believes, and the front office believes, that they can make a run because they decided this week to not sell at the trade deadline. They actually bought at the trade deadline. They traded for Khalil Herbert, and they bring him in. Zach Moss has a serious injury, so he's done for the year. So they go out, they acquire the running back because they're trying to win. They're trying to win. Now, it's tough tonight. Very tough tonight at Baltimore. I don't think Higgins is going to be playing. Maybe he does play. The remaining schedule for Cincinnati is no joke. At Baltimore, at the Chargers. They got 2 games against Pittsburgh and that Steelers defense. They play at Dallas, at Tennessee. Those should be wins. And then they play Cleveland and Denver. So, you know, Baltimore, Chargers, 2 against Pittsburgh. Not easy. Not easy at all. But Cincinnati, they do have the components to make a run. They have confidence that they can turn a season around because they've done it before. I've got them going 5-3 in their final 8 games. So they could make a run, but I think they likely fall short. All right, before I get to story number 3 on this Thursday night, do me a favor. Doesn't take much time, doesn't cost you any money. Click that thumbs up on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're watching on Twitter, give us a like, but especially YouTube. YouTube, they love engagement. That's how we drive the eyeballs to the product. So don't forget to hit the like button as you watch this on YouTube. Don't forget to throw a comment in. Let me know what you're drinking. I'm drinking a Zero Gravity Oktoberfest tonight with a 5.4 ABV. Zero Gravity, if you're wondering, is from Burlington, Vermont. It's a very good beer. I would suggest you try it if you like Marzens. So that is what I'm drinking tonight. What are you drinking tonight? And do you think Cincinnati can make a run? Throw a comment in. Comments, likes, that helps engagement. And, of course, subscribe. I'm less than 100 people away. We are less than 100 people from subscribing to hit our goal of 5,000 subscribers before Thanksgiving. So we've got, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, less than 100 subscribers to go. So make sure you click that subscribe button as well. All right, story number three. Story number three this week has to be the trade deadline deals. Usually the NFL is not very busy, the trade deadline. Let me have a drink here. Usually the trade deadline is not too busy for the NFL, but this year the trade deadline was very busy. I mean, you look at Cincinnati, Baltimore tonight, right? Told you Herbert was brought into Cincinnati, running back. The Ravens, they were part of a busy trade deadline. They added Tre'Davious White, the cornerback who was playing for the Rams, formerly the Buffalo Bills. Now, he's not going to play tonight because of the quick turnaround, but the Ravens, they needed something in that secondary, so they trade for White. 7th-round picks were swapped, so it didn't cost them much at all. Baltimore's pass defense has not been good. Pro Football Focus, by the way, they rank White as the 177th ranked cornerback in football this year. So White has not been very good coming back from injuries and all that stuff. But they needed a body. In White, he's had high levels of play in his history. He played a number of good years in Buffalo. So I'm figuring Baltimore hopes they can get the best of White for the remainder of this season. But the Ravens had to do something. Their passing defense has been absolute trash. So bringing in White can hopefully help them. Detroit, the Lions, they made a big deal. The Lions traded the 5th pick in the 2025 draft. So coming up in April, they traded a 5th and they traded a 6th in 2026 to Cleveland. The Browns traded Zadarius Smith to the Lions and a 2026 7th-round pick. This makes all the sense in the world if you're the Lions. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson had been the best football player on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL before he got hurt. And that hurt me. It hurt me because I might have had some future money on Hutchinson winning Defensive Player of the Year. And I feel like he had a pretty decent chance at doing that. But, of course, he had that major injury. He's done for the rest of the regular season, might be done for the rest of the year. So Detroit really needed a pass rusher. They needed a guy who can, not replace Hutchinson because Hutchinson is so good, but they needed somebody who could get to the quarterback. And I don't think they're going to play Zadarius Smith a ton. He might get 20 to 25 snaps, but he can make a major difference in those 20 to 25 snaps. So I thought that was a very good trade by the Lions, a very smart trade by the Lions. They needed that extra pass rush with Hutchinson going out. How about Washington? Washington, I think, they made the biggest deal at the deadline, and that was for Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. Just talked about the Saints firing their coach. They got a ton of cap issues. They wanted to move away from Lattimore. They know that they're in a major rebuild over the next couple of years. So they trade Lattimore to the Commanders. The Commanders gave up a lot. They dealt a 3rd-round pick, 4th-round pick, and 6th-round pick for Lattimore and a 5th. And, you could say this is the Jaden Daniels impact. Washington is now going for it. I mean, they look around, they say to themselves, why not us? Why can't we make a run? There's a surprise team almost every single year. The Commanders are 7-2. I thought the Commanders were going to be better than a lot of people thought, but I thought they'd win 7 or 8 games. They're already at 7 wins. They're at the top of the NFC East. Jaden Daniels has been playing really good football. So they pressed fast forward on this rebuild in Washington, and they understand now that they got a good team. And Kingsbury's done a good job calling the offense. Quinn's done a good job handling the defense and being the head coach. Again, your rookie quarterback is bringing all sorts of excitement and explosive plays to this offense. So now Washington feels like we got a real chance of making some noise here. And they needed a cornerback. So you go out and you trade for the best available cornerback on the market. Lattimore's 28, still has more football left in him. He's got 2 years left on his deal. So you can always look to restructure the contract. If you don't restructure, you still have him for the next 2 seasons. So bringing Lattimore in makes a lot of sense for the Commanders. And the trade makes a lot of sense for the Saints. They're rebuilding now. They do a very good job getting a third and a fourth for Lattimore. And, of course, the fifth. They need capital. They need draft capital. For Washington, Emmanuel Forbes has not been the guy. He has not been it. They drafted him in the first round last year. It has not worked out. Forbes did not play a single snap last week. He has not played a lot for this team this year, and he's pretty much on the outs with Dan Quinn. So you can't rely on Forbes. You bring in Lattimore, and you feel good about it. Pittsburgh made not one but 2 trades at the deadline. The first deal they made was trading a 2025 fifth-round pick for Mike Williams from the Jets. Of course, Williams was the odd man out. The Jets acquired Devontae Adams. Everybody knew that Williams was not necessarily fitting in to begin with. And then when you add Adams, you've got to make a correlating move, and that's exactly what they did. So they end up trading Mike Williams for a fifth-round pick. Williams was not working out for the Jets. I do think he's a better fit in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been dying for a wide receiver to go along with Pickens. I mean, they tried to trade for Brandon Ayuk. They've been involved in all these other conversations. They've been hunting for wide receivers. So they bring in Williams, and I actually like the fit of Williams because Williams, what he does best is he gets down the football field. He gets down that football field, and Russell Wilson throws those sky-scraping bombs downfield. So I think Russell Wilson and Mike Williams is actually a relationship that can work on the field. So I like that move by Pittsburgh. You did not give up a lot. A fifth-round pick is a fifth-round pick. It's a lottery ticket. And you address a need that you've had since the offseason. And then the Steelers made a second move. They traded a seventh-round pick in next year's draft for Preston Smith of the Packers. And now, I mean, when you look at this Steelers defensive line, they got a bunch of dudes. I mean, you look at Watt and Highsmith and Hayward and Herbig and Benton, and now you add Smith to that defensive line. The Steelers defense, of course, it feels like it's every year, but the Steelers defense is damn good. Now you add Preston Smith. He's a little long in the tooth, but you're not going to ask a lot from him because you have that depth on the defensive line. So now you have Preston Smith joining. It's a great job by the Steelers adding at a couple of positions for very little cost. I mean, they gave up a seventh-round pick and a fifth-round pick, and they bring back Williams and Smith. Both guys should help them. And the Steelers, they're sitting at 6-2. Mike Tomlin, all he does is win games. Now, I don't think he's done a particularly great job in the playoffs for the most part, but in the regular season, Mike Tomlin finds ways to win football games. And he's doing it again, 6-2. We wondered about the switch to Russell Wilson. It's worked out fine. And now they add at the deadline. All right, what are you drinking tonight? Throw a comment in. Let me know. I'm having a Zero Gravity Oktoberfest. Let me know if it's, liquor, wine, beer, whatever it is, water, soda. What are you drinking tonight on this Thursday night as we get ready for the Bengals Ravens game in Baltimore? Thursday Night Football, Week 10. All right, story number two. Who is your NFC Super Bowl favorite right now? Let me know. Throw a comment in. Who is your Super Bowl favorite to come out of the NFC? I think a lot of you might actually have the team that I'm going to talk about here. You might. How about the Detroit Lions? I mean, the NFC could be a fait accompli at this point. Detroit wins at Green Bay last week, and we got Amy jumping in saying the Lions. We got Marilyn jumping in saying the S. Let's finish that. The Lion. S. There we go. Lions. We got Eric jumping in saying really digging the Lions. I don't know how you can go against the Lions right now. They have to be the odds-on favorite to make the run in the NFC. Of course, you got to look at San Francisco. They're getting closer to getting Run CMC back. So they're always kind of lurking. The Commanders are a fun story. Philadelphia is super talented. But, I mean, Detroit, they are a team that going into this season, many people thought could get to the NFC Championship game again and could possibly get to the Super Bowl. They beat Green Bay last week 24-14. Now, there are some caveats to that win. Jordan Love was obviously not healthy. He was dealing with a groin injury. And Green Bay actually outgained Detroit 411 yards to 216. Detroit was also helped by a pick six. But here's why you got to love the Lions. They proved last week that they could win a bad weather game. And one of the questions about Detroit, because they play in a dome, is whether or not they can survive the elements. Can Jared Goff survive the elements? Can they play consistent football in bad weather? And they won a bad weather game, which is one of those boxes that a lot of people want them to check. Last week, at least in the regular season, they checked that box. I also love their coordinators, right? Aaron Glenn has done a great job with that defense. He's been one of the better defensive coordinators the last couple of years. And then you have Ben Johnson, who everybody loves universally, their offensive coordinator, very creative, very unique play caller. And so you've got Glenn and Johnson at the coordinator positions. Jared Goff, meanwhile, is completing everything that he throws. 30 straight completions to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown has caught 30 straight passes from Goff. Not a single incompletion the last 30 times those two guys have connected. Goff has like a 70% completion percentage. Now, yes, a lot of that is scheme. A lot of that is Johnson's play calling. But Jared Goff is doing precisely what Detroit needs him to do to get that offense going and to win football games. So Goff's been playing very well. And we all know the weapons. Detroit has tons of weapons. Gibbs, St. Brown, Laporta. Jameson Williams is going through his suspension, but he comes back if he can get, his head on straight. He also might have a weapons charge coming up. But if you can trust him and he can stay on the field and not get into any off-field trouble, he's just an electric talent. So hopefully for Detroit's sake, he's able to get back onto the field. But the way Goff is playing, Gibbs, St. Brown, Laporta, Williams, and then you've got the offensive line. They're a pretty impressive team. They added Zadarius Smith, as we talked about a couple of minutes ago, to help out the pass rush. They've got a couple of fun safeties in Joseph and Branch. They were my preseason NFC pick to get to the Super Bowl, so I'm not surprised. But they're playing good football. They believe in their head coach, and they're a fun team. They're a fun team to watch. All right, before we get to story number one, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Doesn't cost you any money. Doesn't take a ton of time. But the likes and the comments, they help us beat that YouTube algorithm. And, of course, subscribing is a significant thing as well. Trying to get to 5,000 subscribers. We've got 3 weeks to do so. Got to get there by Thanksgiving. We're less than 100 subscribers away. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. We do this podcast every Thursday night during the football season. Crafts and Kickoffs. We have a beer, and we talk some football. Tonight, I am drinking a Zero Gravity Oktoberfest Mars and Lager. It's a 5.4 from Burlington, Vermont. All right, story number one. Cowboys. They add and they lose talent in the same week. So the Cowboys, they acquired Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver from Carolina, and a 25 7th-round pick for a 2025 4th-round pick. Now, do I think this is an overpay? I think it's an overpay going off what Mingo has done in the NFL so far, which hasn't been a lot. But he was a higher-up 2nd-round pick. He's got contract term. He's coming off that bad rookie year. But you also have to think about Bryce Young was not good last year. That Carolina offense was not good last year. The team wasn't good last year. They blew it up. So, how much of Mingo's bad rookie season had to do with Mingo? How much of his bad rookie season had to do with playing for the Carolina Panthers? We're fixing to find out over the next, 10 weeks or so. But the contract term is why you do this deal if you're Dallas, because you've got Mingo for another couple of years if you want him. So, we'll see how it all comes together for Jonathan Mingo. Obviously, Dallas loved him in the draft last year. You don't give up a 4th-round pick unless you believe in this guy. So I'm thinking Jerry Jones or Stephen Jones, they have Jonathan Mingo posters all over their bedrooms or something, and we'll see if Mingo makes them look like geniuses. But the bigger story, and the biggest story in the NFL this week has to be Dak Prescott, his hamstring. And the latest on Dak doesn't sound good. It does not sound good at all. Earlier in the week, we thought that it would be about a month. Jerry Jones went on the radio on Tuesday and said that, Dak could be put on the IR. So we thought Prescott might miss a month of action. Well, now it looks like it could be worse. Prescott's hamstring injury could potentially keep him on the shelf for longer. His initial diagnosis is that his hamstring tendon partially tore off the bone. That's according to NFL Network's Jane Slater, and Jane Slater is very connected to the Cowboys organization. So Dak, his hamstring, he didn't just strain it or pull it. He partially tore it off the bone. And we always talk about the injuries, right? We talked about this, I think, last week. Hamstrings, calf injuries, those things freak me out. Hamstrings are very difficult to deal with. They tend to linger. They can get worse if you come back too early. Same thing with calf injuries. Calf injuries can turn into Achilles injuries very quickly. So now you have the hamstring injury for Dak, but it's not just an injury. I mean, it is partially off the bone. And the recovery timeline for such an injury generally is more than 4 weeks. And Prescott is seeking additional opinions on the injury, according to Slater. But Dak could be out 5 weeks. He could be out 6 weeks. He could be out longer than that. And this is quickly turning into a nightmare season for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you might say it's already just a nightmare season. And Dak hasn't been good, but he's certainly better than Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. So now you lose your starting quarterback. Dallas is 3-5 this season, tumbling towards the bottom of the NFC East. And what's even tougher is their next 4 games. Dallas's next 4 games without Dak Prescott. They play against Philly, very talented team. I don't think Sirianni's a very good coach, but they're a very talented team. They play against Houston. Now, both of those games are home games for Dallas, which makes things a little bit better. But you got Philly and Houston. Then you have to play at Washington, and then you host the Giants. If they can go 2-2 over the next month without Dak, that would be huge. But even if they went 2-2, they're still only going to be 5-7 on the year, which means they pretty much have to run the table in their final 5 games to get to 10-7 and have a shot at the playoffs. Now, you might creep in at 9-8, but I wouldn't bank on that. So the chances of the Cowboys making the playoffs, I mean, they're 3-5. If you need 10 wins, they need to go 7-2 over their final 9 games. And they might be without Dak for 5-6 weeks. Doesn't look good for Dallas. If Mike McCarthy can pull this thing off, maybe he'll save his job. Maybe Jerry Jones will sign him to a contract extension. But it is not looking great. Not looking great at all. Nick Patterson jumped in, said the favorite has to be the Lions. I would consider the Vikings, but we have not seen him in a situation where he's in the playoff hunt yet. And then he says he's talking about Sam Darnold. Yeah, the Vikings. I mean, look, Kevin O'Connell's great. Brian Flores is damn good. Defensive coordinator. And you obviously have Justin Jefferson. You got some talent on that team. But you're right to question Sam Darnold and that kind of tense playoff atmosphere, trying to make a run. Very, very difficult. Goff has gone through that before. Of course, he lost the Super Bowl with the Rams against the Patriots. The offense didn't play well that night. Sean McVay was out-coached big time. But then last year, he made the run to the NFC Championship game, and I'd argue they should have won that game. So Jared Goff has proven that he can be good enough to get to a Super Bowl, and then he gets the NFC Championship game last year with the Lions. So He has proven himself. Sam Darnold has not proven himself in that kind of situation. But this Dak injury, I would say, likely ends Dallas's hopes and dreams of a playoff spot. Maybe that's not what happens. Maybe Cooper Rush comes in and plays great, but I don't like their chances of making the playoffs sitting at 3-5 now without their starting quarterback for at least the next 4 weeks, if not 5, 6, 7 weeks. Slancha, Zero Gravity, Oktoberfest, fantastic beer. Hopefully you are enjoying your drink as much as I am enjoying my drink on this Thursday night. Bengals, Ravens coming up shortly. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this podcast, to this channel. All of that helps us grow. We're trying to build this community. So don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate every single one of you for joining me on this Thursday night for Crafts and Kickoffs. We'll be back next week, week 11. Enjoy the football. Talk to you soon.